In this video guide, we will be making this Raspberry Stitch beanie. This is a two-part guide. In part 1, you'll achieve this much of your beanie hat and be ready for the decreases that are explained in part 2. Check out the description for other projects that feature this stitch. In this project I'm using Freedom Wool by Twilley of Stamford. Now it's a chunky yarn requiring a 10mm needle, so for results similar to mine, marry the ball band tension. Note I'm using a set of 9 and 10mm circular needles. With a 9mm circular needle, cast on 51 stitches. I've cast on one extra stitch that I need. I'm aiming for 50, but what I'm going to do is basically overlap the last stitch over the first to improve the look of the join in the round. So we're going to be using the magic loop technique, and very importantly we want to ensure that when we secure this join in the round that all our stitches are even, i.e. that they're not twisted, so just double check that. So I'm going to slip purlwise the first stitch over onto the right needle, and then I'm simply going to take the last stitch over the first, and then I'm going to place it back over onto the left needle, and then I'm going to find a marker. I'm just going to make sure that's nice and tight. I've got a homemade marker here, so now I'm ready to begin my first round. And all we're doing to begin with is a knit 1, purl 1 band. So knit 1, bring the yarn to the front, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and we're just going to carry on in this rib pattern until the end of the round. However, I'd like to show you this first round in its entirety, so hopefully this will benefit new knitters. So we're going to take our time here. So knitting 1, bringing the yarn to the front, purling 1, ensuring you take the yarn to the back when you next knit 1. Now let's bring up the left needle. Bring these stitches into action. Then we can slip the stitches we've just made down onto this wire. Right, we ended on a knit one, so the next stitch we're going to purl. And when we get to the end of the first round, our last stitch will be a purl one. So knit one, purl one, and it helps if you divide the work into equal halves. So my work wasn't divided quite as well as it should have been, but the magic loop method is very forgiving if you've got enough stitches. We're down to the last few stitches. Down to the last three, so purling one, knitting one, and ending on a purl one, back to our marker position. Now this time I'm going to divide my work approximately into half. Let's get it all on this wire here. So roughly in half, like so. Pull that through and then we'll work one half at a time. So for the next round, pull up the first half onto the left needle, drop the stitches you've just done onto what I call the wire. So let's continue the rib pattern. So we're going to begin by knitting one, purling one, knitting one, purling one, knitting one, and purling one. So let's take you through one more full round, and that way I know that your rib pattern is nicely set up. Purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, and we're nearly at the approximate halfway point. So we know our next stitch will be a knit one. So where the marker is, I'm just going to encourage the wire to poke through, then the left needle slip those stitches up onto it, and then, so we've ended on a knit one, purl one, then drop the stitches on the right needle so that we can move freely with our right needle here. Ready. Now what did I say? It was a knit one. So next stitch will be a knit one and purl one. So that's all there is to the magic loop technique. It's very, very easy when you get going. Purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and we want to go right up to the marker. I'd recommend making a note of every row that you do so that you know how many you've done. But every round in the rib pattern is identical. We're just knitting one and purling one. And as the pattern builds, you'll see that the purl stitches have a horizontal bar to them, and the knit stitches have a V-like appearance to them. Now I've completed a total of 11 rounds of this knit one, purl one band. Now if you want to do a nice turn back on your hat, then double those rounds, so i.e. 22 rounds, and you get a nice turn back. So grab yourself a 10mm circular needle now, and we're going to get ready for preparing for the increases. We're going to be going from 50 stitches to 60 stitches on this next round. So using a 10mm needle, what I want you to do, actually we just remove that marker for now. What I want you to do is purl 4, so we're changing the stitch style as well, purling 4. And then on the 5th stitch, we're going to do our increase. And we're going to work into the back of the stitch first, purlwise. Then the front of the stitch. So we've increased purlwise. We now have 2 stitches where there was 1. Now I want you to repeat that throughout. Whoops, throwing my marker around, excuse me. So purl 4, and then into the back of the next stitch, purl into it, then into the front of the stitch, purl into it to get your increase, and keep going. Purl 4, into the 5th stitch, work into the back, then the front, keep going, purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, into the 5th stitch, purl into the back, then the front, purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then into the next stitch, go into the back first, purl into it, then purl into the front, purl 4, purl into the back, then the front, purl 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, purl into the back and then the front, purl 4, purl into the back and the front, purl 4, and purl into the back and the front, purl 4, and the very last stitch you end by creating an increase going into the back and then the front. So what we now need to do is just double check that we have 60 stitches. So that's 2, actually let's make sure we don't lose any, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 46, 48, 50, 52, 54, 56, 58, 60. So that's perfect, 60 stitches. So next we're going to position our marker again onto our 10mm needle there, and we're going to go into the main pattern section. So this is round 1. So into the next stitch, enter into it as if you're going to purl. Let me bring the yarn to the front. So ensuring that your yarn is at the front of the work, because your next stitch is going to be a purl. I want you to purl into that stitch without taking the left stitch off. Take your yarn to the back, knit into the same stitch, again leave that on the left needle for the moment, bring the yarn to the front and purl into it. So it's a purl, knit, purl sequence into one stitch before you slip that stitch off the left needle. Next, take 3 stitches and knit the 3 together. like so. And we're going to keep repeating that sequence over and over. So into the next stitch we are going to purl, knit, purl, all into one stitch before we take the stitch off the left needle, then knit 3 together, 1, 2, 3, knit 3 together, and again purl, knit, purl, all into one stitch, and next knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit, 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, and keep going, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together. So we're approximately halfway. So let's bring up the remaining portion into the next stitch, purl, knit, purl, knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together. So we're nearly at the end. So purl, knit, knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together. Purl, knit, purl, and end the round by knitting the last 3 stitches together, and that's round 1 of the main pattern repeat. And you'll be pleased to know that round 2 is a nice break. We are simply going to purl round 2, so bringing up the first lot of stitches, repositioning the marker, bringing the yarn to the front and making sure all my stitches are nice and clear. So round 2 we are having a nice break, a nice purl round. So purl across all of those 60 stitches. Oops. Bring up the next portion. So carrying on purlwise. So that's round 2. Now round 3, so I'll move my marker over, and it's a staggered version of round 1, so you'll be familiar with how this goes. This time we're going to begin by knitting 3 together. and then bringing the yarn to the front so that we can do our purl, knit, purl into the next stitch, and we're just repeating that again throughout. So next 3 stitches, knit them together. Try that again. That's better. Knit those 3 together and purl, knit, purl, knit 3 together, and purl, knit, purl, knit 3 together, haven't quite got the whole stitch there. Now I've got it. Knit 3 together and purl, knit, purl. So you can see those lovely bubbles beginning to emerge. So carrying on, we're going to knit 3 together, and purl, knit, purl. So next, knit 3 together and purl, knit, purl. Knit 3 together and purl, knit, purl. Knit 3 together and purl, knit, purl. And knit 3 together. I'm going to draw up the second portion of the stitches up onto the left needle. And I ended by purling, knitting 3 together even. So next we are purling, knitting and purling into the next stitch, and then knitting 3 together, purl, knit, purl, knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together. purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, purl, knit, purl, and knit 3 together, and then we're left with 1 stitch which we are purling, knitting and purling into that last stitch on round 3. So remove the marker for a moment. Now round 4 is the last round of the main pattern repeat, so if you keep repeating these 4 rounds you build up the lovely Trinity stitch or Raspberry stitch pattern. So the final round of this main pattern repeat is again a lovely purl round, so you'll be pleased to know it's a nice little rest again. So we are just going to purl all the way across for round 4. For this hat we want a total of 4 main pattern repeats, so this would count as your first. Now I need you to repeat rounds 1 to 4 a further 3 times, so a total of 4 times, and then we can move on to the decrease section of the hat. So after 4 rows, that's what our work is looking like. We've got the bobble emerging at the top of the rib, so all is looking nicely established. Right, bring up the last portion, and we're nearly done here for round 4. So we're at the end here, we've done round 4 now. So what I'd like you to do is complete a further 3 sets of the main pattern repeat. So after completing 4 sets of the main pattern repeat, we've got approximately 5.5 inches, 14 centimetres of the Trinity stitch section and 2.5 inches of a ribbed band. So that's roughly what you're aiming for before we go into the decrease section.